My mom has a baby. My dad has a son. They smile in pictures I'll never be in. They celebrate birthdays I'm never invited to. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. My name is Emily. I'm 24 years old, and I've spent most of my life watching my family through a glass wall. Not a real one, of course. It's invisible. You can't touch it, but you can feel it pressing against your chest every time you realize you're on the outside. I've gotten used to scrolling past certain pictures on my phone screen. They're always the same. My mom in a sundress, holding a baby wrapped in pastel blankets. My dad, his arm around a boy who's about 9 now, standing in front of a birthday cake with glowing candles. Everyone is smiling like the world has no sharp edges. Like life is perfect. Except for the part where I'm not in them. I used to zoom in on those photos when I was younger, studying the details. The little bow in the baby's hair. The way my dad's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. The cake, always with their names and frosting, never mine. I imagined what it would feel like to be there, to have someone squeeze my shoulder, laugh with me, tell me to blow out the candles before the wax dripped onto the icing. But I was never in the frame. I was never even in the room. When I was small, I thought maybe there was an explanation. That I'd somehow missed the party, or the picture was taken while I was in the bathroom, or maybe my name was written on a different cake waiting somewhere else. But that cake never came. And eventually, I learned to stop expecting it. It's strange, the way absence can feel heavier than presence. The way a missing invitation can weigh more than the thickest winter coat. You carry it with you everywhere, at school, at work, even sitting alone in your bedroom, wondering what you did wrong. I don't remember the exact moment I realized my parents had other families. Not just step-families. Not just remarriages. Families where they were whole. Where they gave their smiles freely, where love seemed easy. And I was not part of it. It's not that they never spoke to me or never saw me. There were visits, phone calls, the occasional awkward lunch. But there's a difference between being acknowledged and being wanted. Between being a responsibility and being a child someone loves so fiercely they can't imagine life without you. Growing up, I was always somewhere in between, a name on a school form, a birthday card sent late, a photo on the fridge that probably stayed there out of guilt more than pride. And so my story doesn't start with laughter or balloons. It starts here, in that quiet space between two worlds, my mother's and my father's. Worlds that never seemed to have a seat for me at their table. I'm telling you this now because it's not just my story. It's for anyone who's ever been the outsider in their own family. For anyone who's ever looked at a picture and felt like they were staring at a life they were supposed to have, but didn't. When I think about my earliest memories, they don't come in full stories. They're more like fragments, small flashes of sound, smell, and feeling. Like the smell of pancakes drifting from the kitchen. The sound of my mom's laugh echoing down the hallway. The scratchy feel of the old couch where I'd sit, legs swinging, waiting for her to notice me. In those days, my parents were still together, but they were never really together. Not in the way I'd seen in other kids' houses, where moms and dads sat close on the couch or exchanged little touches without thinking. In my house, there was space between them. Always space. I didn't understand it then. Kids rarely do. I just knew that my dad worked late, and my mom stayed busy. And somehow, I always seemed to be in the way. There's this one memory I can't shake. I must have been around 5. I had drawn a picture of the 3 of us, me in the middle, holding their hands, all smiling. I remember running to my mom excited, because I thought she'd hang it on the fridge. She looked at it for a second, then set it on the table, and said she'd put it up later. It never made it to the fridge. It sounds small, doesn't it? But for a 5-year-old, it was huge. Then there were the mornings when I'd wake up to find my dad already gone. No goodbye. Just a cold coffee cup on the counter, and the smell of his cologne lingering by the door. Sometimes I'd wait by the window, watching the driveway, hoping he'd come back before school. Most times he didn't. The cracks got wider when arguments started happening more often. They weren't loud screaming matches, not the kind you see in movies. They were quiet, sharp, like whispers with a bite. I'd be in my room coloring, and I'd hear my mom's voice low and tense, my dad's replies even lower. At 6 years old, I started learning how to walk softer, talk quieter, and make myself smaller. If I could just be good enough, maybe they'd smile more. Maybe they'd stop looking at each other like strangers. But kids can't fix what's already broken. By the time I was 7, my dad had moved out. I remember standing at the doorway as he packed a black duffel bag. He hugged me, told me he'd see me soon, but his eyes didn't match his voice. My mom didn't cry. She just crossed her arms and told him to take the spare key with him. That's the moment the glass wall started to build. I didn't know it then, but my family was already splitting into pieces, and I was about to find out which piece I would belong to. After the divorce, life didn't break apart in one loud crash. It was quieter than that. It was like someone had taken scissors to my life and cut it down the middle, then handed me the smaller half without asking if I wanted it. Weekdays meant living with my mom. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the neighbors cooking. My room was barely big enough for my bed and a desk, but I didn't complain. Complaining never changed anything, It only made the air in the room colder. She worked a lot. Extra shifts, late nights. I'd do my homework at the kitchen table, the TV murmuring in the background. Sometimes I'd wait up just to say goodnight when she came home, but most nights she went straight to her room, her phone glowing in her hand. I told myself she was tired, not distant. Weekends were my dad's turn. At first, it was almost exciting. I'd pack my small backpack on Friday night, 2 changes of clothes, my toothbrush, a book I was reading. We had a meeting spot, a coffee shop parking lot halfway between our homes. I'd stand there with my bag until his car pulled in. Sometimes he was on time. Sometimes I'd wait 15, 20 minutes, pretending to scroll on my phone so no one noticed I was alone. His new apartment felt temporary, like a hotel room he never fully unpacked. White walls, a couch too clean to feel lived in. One framed photo of me on the shelf, a picture from before everything changed. I used to look at that photo and wonder if he saw the same girl when he looked at me now. We didn't talk much during those weekends. We'd watch TV, maybe go out for lunch. He'd ask about school, I'd give short answers, and then there'd be these stretches of silence that felt like walking across thin ice. I never knew which question might crack it. At both homes, I noticed small details that didn't belong to me. At my mom's, there was a tiny pink blanket folded in a laundry basket months before she said anything. At my dad's, there were sneakers by the door too small for my feet, and once a half-empty juice box in the fridge that I hadn't touched. I didn't ask. Asking felt like knocking on a door that wasn't meant for me. I tried to be easy. Easy to keep, easy to manage, easy to love. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I didn't bring up the things I noticed. And for a while, that worked, at least on the surface. But late at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone in my room, I felt it. The space between me and them. It was like standing in a doorway, not sure if I was meant to walk in or stay out. And every day that space seemed to grow just a little wider. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came in small pieces, like breadcrumbs scattered through my weekends and weekdays until they formed a path I couldn't ignore. The pink blanket at my mom's wasn't a mystery anymore. One day she came home carrying a baby carrier, and inside was a tiny girl with a face so small it looked like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. My mom's smile was brighter than I'd seen in years, like someone had switched on a light she'd been keeping off. She didn't look at me that way. I wanted to feel happy for her. I told myself I should be. This was my baby sister after all. But from that moment on, the apartment felt different. My room stayed the same size, but somehow there was less space for me in it. The baby's cries filled the air at night. Visitors came more often, their voices loud with congratulations, their arms full of gifts. I'd hover in the corner, holding a diaper bag or passing a bottle, but no one ever asked about school, or if I was sleeping okay. My mom's life was full now. Not in a bad way, just in a way that didn't have room for my quiet presence. At my dad's place, the breadcrumbs looked different. The sneakers by the door grew into bigger sneakers, then into soccer cleats. The juice boxes in the fridge multiplied. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find a boy sitting on the couch, watching cartoons. He looked about 6 or 7, with messy hair and a gap-toothed smile. My dad introduced him casually, like I already knew. "This is Ryan." The way he said it, I could tell Ryan wasn't just a visitor. Ryan was part of this life. The weekends changed after that. Mornings turned into game days, afternoons into errands. I came along, but I wasn't part of the rhythm. At the soccer field, I'd sit on the bleachers while my dad shouted from the sidelines. He never shouted like that for me, not at spelling bees or school plays or anything I'd done. It wasn't that anyone was cruel to me. No one told me I wasn't wanted. No one said the words out loud. But you don't need words to know when you've been moved to the edges of someone's world. Holidays became the hardest. Christmas morning at my mom's was about the baby's first everything, first stocking, first ornament, first Santa photo. At my dad's, it was about Ryan's wish list, Ryan's excitement, Ryan's laughter echoing through the living room. I got gifts, of course. A sweater here, a gift card there. Things you could pick out in 10 minutes at a store. I learned how to unwrap them with a smile, say thank you, and pretend they meant more than they did. The pictures told the rest of the story. On social media, my mom's profile was full of the baby, her first steps, her first ice cream, her chubby cheeks smeared with cake. My dad's was full of Ryan, holding a soccer trophy, fishing at the lake, blowing out birthday candles. I was never in those pictures. Not once. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. I didn't like being in pictures anyway. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about whether I liked it. It was about the fact that no one wanted me in them. And that's when the question started to grow in my head. A question I couldn't shake. If they're happy without me, where do I belong? After a while, I stopped trying to stand in the center of their lives. Corners were safer. In corners, no one bumped into you by accident, and you didn't have to pretend you weren't in the way. At my mom's, I learned how to move quietly through the apartment, like background noise. I'd slip into the kitchen for a snack when the baby was napping, careful not to let the cupboard doors creak. I kept my music low, my footsteps softer. My school projects stayed in my room, my drawings stacked neatly in a folder no one opened. It wasn't anger that kept me there, it was habit. I'd watch her laugh with the baby, a real, full laugh I hadn't heard in years, and tell myself it was good she was happy. But in the quiet moments after, I'd wonder why she never laughed like that with me anymore. At my dad's, I became a shadow in the background of his weekends with Ryan. I'd trail behind them at the grocery store, my footsteps falling just far enough back that I wouldn't interrupt. At the checkout, the cashier always assumed we were a family of 3. I never corrected them. Sometimes my dad would turn to me and ask about school, his voice quick, like he was squeezing it in before the next thing. I'd answer in a sentence or two, then watch his attention slide back to Ryan. I don't think he realized how easy it was for me to tell when his focus shifted. You can feel it. The birthdays were the worst. Not mine, those had become quiet affairs long ago, but theirs. I'd be at my mom's for the baby's birthday, watching her smash cake with her tiny hands while everyone around her laughed. Or I'd be at my dad's, watching Ryan tear into wrapping paper while people clapped and took pictures. I'd stand there, smiling at the right moments, clapping when it made sense, but it felt like I was clapping for a movie I wasn't part of. At school, I didn't talk much about my family. It was easier to let people assume whatever they wanted. Some kids thought I was an only child, and in a way that was true. Others assumed my parents were just busy like theirs. I let the stories float around me without correcting them. I started spending more time in the library during lunch. The shelves didn't care if I was quiet, and the books didn't mind if I stayed too long. I liked sitting at the far table, the one tucked between the window and the radiator. It was warm there in winter, and no one asked me why I wasn't somewhere else. The older I got, the more I realized how much energy it took to keep pretending I was fine. Smiling at the right moments. Laughing when it felt expected. Acting like the absence didn't weigh anything. But the truth is absence weighs a lot. It sits on your chest in the middle of the night, and you have to remind yourself to breathe. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. Anger takes fire, and I was just tired. Tired of watching from the sidelines. Tired of being an extra in a story where I was supposed to be one of the main characters. Tired of wondering if it was me. If I'd done something to make them stop looking at me the way they used to. It's strange the way you can fade without disappearing. You can still be in the room, still share the air, still exist in the technical sense, but in every way that matters, you're gone. And part of me started to wonder if maybe that was easier for everyone. It didn't happen in one dramatic explosion. There was no shouting match, no slam doors. It was quieter than that, but sharper. Like glass cracking under pressure, you didn't even know was there. It started with a photo. Not one I found online this time. This one was handed to me, printed, glossy, edges still curled from being fresh out of the machine. My mom gave it to me without thinking, like passing a salt shaker at dinner. In it, she's holding the baby, my sister, on her lap. They're both wearing matching sweaters. The living room is full of balloons, and there's a cake on the coffee table with pink frosting. Written across the top, in big careful letters, Happy Family. There's no sign I was ever there. Because I wasn't. I don't remember what I said when she handed it to me. Probably nothing. I just slipped it into my bag and stared at it later that night in my room. I traced my finger over the cake in the picture, wondering if there'd ever been a moment where she thought about inviting me, or if the thought never even came. A few weeks later, it was my dad's turn. I showed up for the weekend and saw a new frame on the bookshelf. Inside was a photo of him and Ryan, both wearing baseball caps, smiling at the camera with matching grins. I'd never seen my dad smile like that in real life. Not at me. Not in years. I tried not to care. I really did. But that night, lying on the couch while Ryan slept in my old spot on the air mattress, it hit me. Maybe this wasn't a phase. Maybe this wasn't temporary. Maybe this was the way it was going to be forever. And that thought broke something in me. For years, I'd been walking around their lives like I was afraid to scuff the floor, hoping that if I was careful enough, they'd notice me again. That maybe one day, I'd get to step back into the middle. But the middle wasn't waiting for me. They'd filled it with someone else. After that, I started pulling away, not in big, obvious ways, but in the little threads that tied us together. When my mom texted to see if I could watch the baby, I'd say I had homework. When my dad asked if I wanted to come to Ryan's soccer game, I'd tell him I had plans. Most of the time, those plans were just me sitting in my room, reading or going for a walk. With music in my ears. But they didn't know that. And they didn't ask. That was the part that stung the most. How easy it was for them to let me slip further away. It's a strange kind of pain, realizing you've been working so hard to be part of someone's life while they haven't lifted a finger to be part of yours. It makes you question every moment, every smile, every love you they've ever said. Was it real? Or just something they said because that's what parents are supposed to say? I used to think love was something you could earn if you tried hard enough. Now, I wasn't so sure. By the end of that year, I'd stopped waiting for invitations that never came. I stopped checking their social media. I stopped hoping to see my face in their photos. And somewhere deep inside, I started building a wall, not to keep them out, but to keep myself from breaking every time they left me out. I didn't know it then, but that wall would change everything. The wall didn't go up overnight. It started with small bricks, the kind no one notices at first. A skipped phone call here. A half-hearted text there. Smiles that didn't quite reach my eyes. By the time I was 18, I had mastered the art of staying polite while keeping my heart locked away. I wasn't mean. I wasn't confrontational. I just stopped offering pieces of myself to people who never seemed to notice when they dropped them. If my mom asked about my day, I gave her the short version. If my dad mentioned something Ryan did, I didn't force myself to fake enthusiasm. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore, it was just there, like background noise. I didn't realize it then, but all the energy I used to spend trying to belong somewhere was now spilling into other parts of my life. I started working part-time at a little bookstore in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it smelled like paper and coffee, and no one there made me feel like an afterthought. The owner, Mrs. Keller, was in her 60s and had the kind of warm, no-nonsense kindness that didn't need to be announced. She'd slip me an extra cookie from the cafe in the back, tell me about her favorite novels, and most importantly, listen when I talked. School became my safe zone. I joined clubs, not because I was trying to fit in, but because I liked having a reason to show up for something that was mine. Debate club, yearbook, the community volunteer group. Everywhere I went, I met people who didn't know my family history, who didn't see me as the girl left out of the picture. I found out I was good at certain things, organizing events, making people laugh when they were nervous, solving problems before they got messy. The more I leaned into those parts of myself, the less I thought about the places I didn't belong. But there were still moments that pulled me back. A Facebook notification from my dad's account, new pictures of him and Ryan fishing. A text from my mom. Can you babysit tonight? No, how are you? Before the request. Those moments reminded me the wall was necessary. Without it, I'd still be a kid standing in the cold, pressing my face to the glass, waiting for someone to notice. And slowly, something unexpected started to happen. I stopped needing them to notice. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was just a quiet truth I woke up to one morning while pouring coffee at the bookstore. The sun was streaming through the windows, Mrs. Keller was humming to herself as she arranged a display, and I thought, this is enough. Right now this is enough. It scared me a little, realizing I could be okay without them. Because if I didn't need their love to survive, then what did that make all those years of trying? Maybe wasted. Maybe not. Maybe just lessons. All I knew was, for the first time, the life I was building didn't feel like a consolation prize. It felt like a choice. It happened with my dad first. I hadn't planned on saying anything. Honestly, I never thought I would. Confrontations weren't my style. I was the type to swallow my words, smile politely and carry the weight alone. But sometimes the weight shifts in a way you can't balance anymore, and it either crushes you or you finally set it down. We were in his kitchen. Ryan was in his room playing video games, the sound of explosions and cartoon voices spilling down the hall. My dad was rinsing a coffee mug at the sink. It was an ordinary Saturday morning, the kind I'd been through 100 times before. And then he asked, in that casual voice people use when they expect a casual answer, how school was going. Something in me snapped, not loudly, but cleanly, like a string breaking under too much tension. I told him school was fine. Then I told him I was tired. Not from studying, but from trying so hard to matter to him. The words came out quieter than I expected. I didn't cry. My voice didn't shake. But I watched him freeze, his hand still holding the mug under the water, his shoulders going still like someone had just turned the volume off on the whole room. I told him I noticed the pictures, the games, the way his world spun around Ryan, and how I was always standing somewhere on the edge. I told him it wasn't about jealousy, it was about feeling like I was a guest in my own father's life. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just stood there, water still running. When he finally spoke, his words were slow and careful. He said he didn't realize I felt that way. He said he thought I understood. But here's the thing about, I thought you understood. It usually means, I never asked. I didn't argue. I didn't list the birthdays missed, the calls skipped, the visits cut short. I didn't need to. We both knew. The conversation ended without a big resolution. He said he'd try harder. I said okay. But inside, I knew it wasn't about him trying harder anymore. It was about me not hanging my happiness on his effort. A week later, I found myself doing the same thing with my mom. Not as directly, but enough for her to notice. She called to ask if I could babysit. I told her I couldn't, no excuse, just a simple no. There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine her frowning on the other end of the line. She asked if everything was okay. I told her yes, but that I had my own plans. She didn't push. And in that quiet, I realized something important. Sometimes setting a boundary isn't about making the other person understand. It's about showing yourself you have the right to one. That was the day I stopped asking myself how to get back into their worlds. And started asking myself how to make mine big enough that I didn't need to. By the time spring rolled around, my life felt different. Not fixed. Not perfect. But mine. The bookstore was steady work. I'd been accepted into a college a few towns over, and the thought of starting fresh somewhere new was like seeing sunlight after a long winter. My days were filled with things I'd chosen, not scraps of time handed to me by someone else. And then it happened again. Another photo. It popped up on my feed one night while I was scrolling in bed. My mom. My baby sister. A group of smiling relatives, some I barely recognized. They were outside under string lights, a banner in the background that read Happy 5th birthday. No one had told me there was a party. It should have been just another missed moment in a long list of them, but something about it still hit differently. Maybe because I was finally in a place where I thought I'd stop caring. Maybe because the people in that picture were the same ones who had congratulated me at my high school graduation last year, telling me how grown up I'd become. Maybe because the cake in the photo had 2 layers, covered in pink frosting roses, and all I could think about was how I'd never had one like that. 2 days later, my dad called. Not to talk to me. He was returning a missed call from earlier in the week. In the background, I heard Ryan's voice, laughter, and someone singing off-key. I asked what was going on. Oh, we're just celebrating. Ryan won his soccer championship. Another celebration. Another room I wasn't in. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at my phone. And for the first time, there was no ache. No lump in my throat. Just a strange, clear emptiness, like the tide had gone out for good. I realized in that moment that the life I'd been building for myself wasn't just a substitute. It was my actual life now. The bookstore, my friends from school, my plans for college, these were my people, my places. Not backups. Not placeholders. Mine. It wasn't about giving up on my parents. It was about accepting that their worlds had walls I couldn't break through. I could stand at the gates forever, or I could start walking somewhere else. That night, I closed my social media for a while. I didn't need the reminders. I lit a candle, poured myself some tea, and made a list of things I wanted to do before leaving for college. Not once did I write, get invited to their parties. By the time summer came, the past felt like something stored in an old box at the back of a closet. Still there, still mine, but no longer taking up space in my everyday life. I wasn't naive. Some things would always sting. A random memory. A voice that sounded like my dad's in a crowd. The way a baby laughed in the park, reminding me of my sister. But the sting didn't last like it used to. I'd learned something important. Missing pieces don't have to define the whole picture. The day I moved into my college dorm, Mrs. Keller from the bookstore helped me carry boxes up the stairs. She fussed over my bedding, made sure my mini fridge was plugged in, and told me to visit when I came home for the holidays. My friends helped me set up my desk, stringing little lights above it until the room felt warm and lived in. It was everything I'd ever wanted from family, even if it didn't look the way I'd imagined when I was a kid. My mom sent a short text that day, "Proud of you." My dad called and told me to work hard. And that was enough. Not perfect. Not whole. But enough. Because here's the thing, I wasn't standing outside the window anymore. I was inside my own life, surrounded by people who wanted me there, not because they had to, but because they chose to. I didn't need to be in their pictures to feel real anymore. I was in my own. Pictures of late-night study sessions, bookstore coffee runs, afternoons in the park with friends who laughed until their stomachs hurt. I used to think family was about blood. Now I know it's about presence. About the people who show up, stay, and make room for you without you having to fight for it. And as I sat in my dorm room that first night, the city lights glowing through the window, I realized something. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was home. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.